Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Just a quick note before we dive in. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not to serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are my own and those of my guest, and they don't necessarily represent those of any organizations that I'm affiliated with. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com. Now, let's get started. How do you have the best summer travel, get the best summer travel deals? How do you travel with your financial hat on? That is what we're going to be covering today. I've got a great guest. I'm joined by Bry Keith, who is the founder of Bry Guides, a travel concierge service that helps people turn points and miles into premium travel. After a decade in New York City, working in finance and tech, he now travels the world while helping clients save thousands and use their points to explore the world in comfort. Bry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I can't wait to have this discussion. Full disclosure, I like traveling in comfort. It's probably because I, kind of grew up doing due diligence trips and financial, like on other people's dime. And I learned that luxury does feel a little different. So I can't wait to hear how to keep somewhat of a budget in mind as you kind of upgrade your travel experience.
It certainly does. And I think once you get a taste of what it's like up at the front, it's hard to go back. And what I do and what I help clients do is help unlock those luxury experience with the credit card points they already have. And oftentimes very small tweaks in, your strategy and where you're spending and then how you're redeeming those points can unlock those types of experiences for less than you're already spending on just booking economy.
Well, this is perfect because I think people often, first question is, should I do the travel point credit cards? And I think it depends. If you're just looking for the very least cost for your credit cards, then that may not be the best option because there is often an annual fee. But what do you tell people when they start with that question, even before we get to the points themselves and how to maximize them?
Yeah. So it depends on your goals, right? So every person is going to come with different, goals and objectives. But if you are going to want to turn your credit card points into the most, and particularly into luxury travel, I would certainly, recommend going with one of those travel-based credit cards. And while they do have annual fees, oftentimes a lot of these cards will have different types of, credits or redemptions that make those fees worth it very, very quickly. And I particularly recommend ones where you can have those points and then transfer those points to external partners. And most of those, that's where you're going to really start to unlock the most value from these credit card points and rewards. Those cards are usually going to have an annual fee associated.
Well, and here's one point is I know the credit card companies in their engagements and cooperation with the point kind of dealers, let's say, they know that a lot of us are kind of not engaged or not as proactive. So they're making money, first of all, because not everybody pays their credit card statement off at the end of every month. One of the things I say when people ask about points is like, are you able to pay it off? Because being motivated to put more on your cards if you can't, let's talk about it after we figure that part out, and you need to take a break from those points getting. Once you go there, though, you need to understand how to use the points because I assume that there is inflation when it comes to the points as well as with our currency. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. So every year, programs look at flights and how things are. And, what it takes to book the same experience goes up in the number of points each year. So I usually recommend to people, if you have something you're thinking about, do not hoard your points, right? Because next year and in years down the road, it's going to cost a lot more points to unlock the same experience that you're doing right now at that same level of points.
Yeah, it'll cost more points. The prices go up. And with some of those, kind of engaging, moving around the points, but also taking your benefits and using them, you need to know what those benefits are first, right? Like you've got to read the fine print. How do you recommend people do that?
I think it really depends on what is going to give you the ultimate return on happiness for you personally, right? Some people are going to really get excited about, sitting at the front of the plane and being in business class. Other people are going to want to turn those points into, maybe luxury hotel stays. And what, I help my clients do is basically figure out, what are the goals that you have, right? And then let's get you in the right strategy that's going to support those goals. So for someone that wants to earn, points that they put towards hotels, there are certain credit cards and transfer alliances that we're going to want to have that person earning points in that's going to help them unlock that. For someone that wants to do that with flights, we're going to want to be strategic about where they're flying from and which airlines are their kind of preferred airlines so that they're earning points sort of in those areas as well. So that when it comes time to redeem those points, we have those kind of transfer windows open so that they can get the most bang for their buck from their points and ultimately the type of experience that they're going to want to have.
Perfect. So this, I'm thinking, okay, what's most important to me? I mean, all things being equal, luxury across the board sounds amazing. But if you're one of those people who's like, I can be packed in like a sardine on the flight because it's just 8 hours, but I really want to maximize the look and feel and neighborhood of the location I'm staying in. These are kind of reflective questions that you should assess over time, right?
Absolutely. And I think, as a rule of thumb, there are going to be slight tweaks in your strategy, but the overall strategy, I would say for most people, if they want to earn credit card points, right, that they can put towards travel, is to start earning points in what I would call a transferable points currency. And so some of the big ones that you would think about would be Amex, Chase, Capital One, Bilt Rewards. Those are some of the more popular ones, Citi as well. And that's going to give you just more flexibility and options when it comes time to redeem those points. Because
So
if
you're
you
not starting with the brand of either the airline or the hotel. Instead, you're starting with a flexible kind of identity in terms of the brand.
Yeah, and the way I kind of think about your strategy and an analogy that I use are kind of like your main dishes and your side dishes, right?
Okay.
So for your main dishes where you're doing most of your spending and the cards you're putting that on, it makes sense to have that in a transferable points currency, particularly if you're not 100% sure on your strategy, right? Because
Hmm.
then you have options to transfer those points to different airlines or to different hotels or use them right kind of in your credit cards tool. Then the side dishes, if you live in, let's say, Newark, New Jersey, right? And that is a United hub, then we're going to want to, maybe open cards that are going to have, the right benefits or the right perks. Maybe, you want free check bag and opening like a United credit card that might get you that option as well. So it's thinking about what are the perks that matter to you and then aligning, cards with the right lounge access, cards with, the right transfer partnerships to those things so that you can get ultimately the type of travel day that you would like.
So I am about 40 minutes from the Detroit Metro Airport, and there's two different terminals. One is the Delta terminal, and I will not fly on the other airlines unless it's an emergency because there's just a different experience there. But then that would be a side dish, so like Delta priority, but we also need that transferability. Is that right?
Yeah, and Delta's a really interesting use case too, because it's one of the best airlines in the United States for sure. I think they have a really premium quality of service, and
Mhm.
earning and redeeming Delta points is really great. But Delta does tend to be priced a lot higher than their
Mhm.
competitors, particularly in the point space. So a lot of folks come to me, with Delta branded credit cards, and then when it comes time to book a trip to Europe, they might not have enough points to do that. Whereas if they had instead had the same amount of points in Amex, which is, a Delta partner, right? We can then transfer those points from Amex to Delta or to a dozen other airlines. And some of the times, if you're wanting to fly, let's say, from Detroit business class to France, right? On Delta, that's going to cost a couple 100,000 points. But if we have points in Amex instead, we can transfer those points to Air France or another kind of carrier and book that for usually under 100,000 points. So the value that you get from having points in a transferable points currency can really unlock a lot more luxury rewards when it comes time to finally book. But that's where that, card strategy matters and making sure that you're earning points in a place where A, it's flexible to transfer out, and then B can get you the rewards that you particularly want.
Now you're saying transfer. You're not going shopping on the actual rewards page for the Amex card or like I have a Chase Rewards business line where it's like generic rewards. You're actually transferring them to the place that you're going to be purchasing and then shopping. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to think about this, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to optimize how we are earning our points, right? And that's making sure that we're in the right cards and that we're optimizing our spend based on, this card might get 3x on restaurants, so we want to be using that card there, right? Then it comes time to redeem the points. So we've been good, we opened up the right cards, we got the sign-on bonuses, we're doing a great job, earning lots of points. We have hundreds of thousands of points and it's time to book. This is where it comes time to redeem the points, right? And this brings us to a common mistake that people are making. And now there's obviously exceptions to this, but the common mistake that people are making is actually booking directly in their credit cards tool.
Okay.
So now sometimes this makes sense. This makes sense usually for domestic flight purchases. You mentioned in Chase has pretty good rewards in terms of when you're booking with one of those cards. Usually you get 1.25 or 1.5x if you have a Chase Sapphire card. But where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, particularly on longer haul or international flights, is by taking the points from your credit card provider and transferring them out to external partners. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where I help clients a lot, right? Because usually you can get, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've helped people get over 10x their points value by doing this one step, right? And so what is going to happen if you book in your credit card tool? It's going to be tethered to that cash price, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so let's maybe use an example, right? Let's go back to that. You're flying to France and you want to fly in business class. Well, a business class flight to France is going to be, let's say $3,000, $5,000, right? Round trip, all things in. So if you would book that in your Chase or your Amex tool, that would be 300,000 or 500,000 points, right? Because it's tethered to that dollar amount. Now, if you would take those same points and transfer them to Air France and book directly with Air France, you're often going to find that that price is significantly lower. Again, you can routinely find those for less than 100,000 points. So if you are transferring out and booking for 100,000 points, what would have cost 3 or 500,000 points, you're getting 3 to 5 extra points value just by doing this one step when you redeem your points. And these are the deals that I'm an expert in finding in and help clients find all the time.
Okay, I'm ready to hire you. So when people are ready for that trip, they've got it all laid out. They've also been collecting their points. What do you end up doing? Are you like logging in with them, giving them a list of instructions, shopping on their behalf, or how does the travel concierge work his magic?
Yeah, so there's two different things that I do that are my main like kind of business objectives. First, if you're new to credit card points and miles, you're not really sure where to start. You want to just get on the phone and chat with me. I do, one-on-one consultations where we figure out what the right strategy for you is, right? What are the travel goals that you are wanting to optimize for? Are they, luxury? Are they, volume? Where are you living? Because all of these things are going to impact the strategy. Then once you have and have earned all of those points that you want to use and then put towards travel, and you say, all right, we're ready. We're going to France. Let's do it. Or Italy or wherever it may be. All you do is there's a form on my website, and you just go in and you fill out that form, and you enter your date, destination, and points balance. And then what I will do is I will go out and scour all of the different channels because sometimes these deals can be a little tricky to find, right? Because you're looking at a lot of different programs. There are some aggregator tools, but it's a little bit confusing, particularly if you're not, well versed in the space. So what I help clients and customers do, especially people that are just busy that don't have the time to, learn how to do this. I go out and I just find the best possible deal, and then I circle back, give them a few options, and then ultimately together coach them how to move the points and then transfer and book this flight for a much better deal.
That's money well spent. I love the concept because if you're just doing, one trip, feels intimidating. Also, the level of complexity, the degree of difficulty, at least for my own self-interest, sounds like it's well worth paying for a service. And so many cases we evaluate that and say, pay for it, please.
Yeah, and look, and if people want to learn too, I have a whole masterclass that I built that has 12 hours of content that you can learn everything that I know if you want to, spend and invest the time. That's certainly something that, people can do as well if you're interested. But I find particularly for the concierge service, these are, busy people that understand the value of their time and they look at how many hours that they are going to spend digging into and looking for and finding a good deal on a trip and realizing that what their hours are worth, right? These are busy professionals, these are business owners, these are people that, just know the value of their time and know that
Mm-hmm.
it's better spent on other things and also want to just book with confidence, knowing that they're going to get the best possible deal when it comes time to travel.
That is so valuable for a large subset of people. I think people are often told, with travel, we used to have travel agents and professionals that typically booked because it was, you couldn't just log in. And nowadays it's more difficult to see where those travel professionals are, but they're out there and they certainly bring value in areas like this. Um,
Yeah, and it's been interesting, right? With the age of the internet, there's been a lot of changes, right? And now we have all of this information sort of at our fingertips. And so what has sort of gone the other way now is that how do you cut through all of that noise when it comes time to
mhm.
plan a trip or find a deal or things like that? And so that's an area where, working with people that are experts in certain parts of the field can help you kind of cut through the noise of the endless amounts of information that we're constantly drinking through a fire hose whenever we log online to try to figure something out ourselves.
Well, since you're an expert on luxury travel, do you have any suggestions on ways to enhance your experience beyond the, initial booking of the flight and booking of lodging? Are there other ways you can upgrade your experience that people may be missing out on if they're just, kind of taking the standard travel planning route?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest way that you can really improve the quality of your travel is just by opening the right cards, right? And so
Mhm.
there's a handful of cards that are going to get you really robust rewards, particularly in the luxury perk space. So, like, what I would consider maybe one of the top perks for that one would be the Amex Platinum. And so there's a bunch of other cards that have these kind of perks as well. But like the Amex Platinum, you're going to unlock lounge access, right? Which is going to, every time you're at an airport, and if you're flying out of, Detroit, you're going to have access to that, Delta Lounge, with that card. Um, when you get to the airport, that card's going to also give you TSA PreCheck included. You're going to have a Clear membership. So you're not going to have to take your laptops out or your shoes off. You're going to zip through security pretty quickly. You're going to go to the lounge. You're not going to be sitting there paying, $30 for the worst airport sandwich you've ever had in your entire life. There is going to be a full, delicious buffet of food and free flowing champagne. If you're at JFK, there's a speakeasy bar where you get like an espresso martini with the 1855, the year Amex was founded, like on there. So, and the thing is once you have a card like this, and once you have that, like if the other week I was flying somewhere and my flight got canceled, right? There was a technical issue on the aircraft, and they're like, sorry, like we're gonna have to put you on the next flight. And so I was able to rebook very quickly because another pro tip, always travel with whatever airline you're on, their airline app downloaded on your phone. Because the moment
Mhm.
they announced that, I logged into the phone, changed the flight, done. Before I even got off the plane. But then I was like, all right, well, now I have 3 hours to kill. What shall I do? And it's like, okay, I'll go to the lounge where there's free food and free alcohol, right? So it takes, when bad things happen, you're just sitting in a level of comfort, right? And then a lot of these, more premium luxury cards will also come with a lot of complimentary things as well. And so, like the Amex Platinum, for example, you'll get automatic gold status at Hilton and Marriott, right? And
Yeah.
so at Hilton, that means like for an upgrade oftentimes, right? And that means, better treatment when it comes time to, show up at the property.
So I want to pivot for a moment, and you specialize in travel advice for LGBTQ clients. Can you talk to the differences and considerations that may be, kind of need to be on your mind or want to be on your mind when you work with your niche clientele?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I absolutely love the tight-knit community that we are all over the world. But unfortunately, in today's political climate, there are a lot of challenges and considerations that us LGBTQ plus folks need to consider that, our, counterparts that maybe are not a member of the community don't need to think about. There are many, many dozens of countries around the world where it is illegal to be gay, that you could be thrown in jail. You could be, in some cases, put to death, right? Just by being who you are. So understanding the implications, are the laws friendly? Is it okay to be, you know, out and myself? And, if you're traveling with a partner, is it okay to hold hands in public? Are we putting ourselves at risk? Is there, a potential risk of safety? These are all kind of considerations that, us LGBTQ plus folks need to be thinking about when it comes time to, book travel and go to certain destinations. So it's constantly something that, is important to understand. And, I travel quite a bit, for the type of work that I do. And so I
Mhm.
get to experience on the ground, how things are, how safe I felt, how, the local laws kind of impact, how you're able to kind of be free and express yourself. And so these types of considerations do really matter, for, clients in this space as well. And something that, we constantly need to be thinking about, when it comes time to book trips and also at home too.
Yeah, I'm sorry that it's necessary to have such vigilance, but also appreciate for the people I care about and the parole planning community that there are resources like yours that are able to talk about both how to be safe, but also how to have the best experience.
Yeah, I think, what we're seeing is, there's a lot of things going on right now in the political sphere as well. But I think the hospitality industry as a whole has been very, open and welcoming, of the LGBTQ plus community. And I look at a lot of like the large, US based chains, and they have, remained firm in their commitment and support of, these diversity and inclusion programs. So, you know,
I've noticed that as well. Yeah.
mhm. So, that's a positive trend, I think, that, I'm certainly grateful for, and, we'll continue to monitor the space as time goes by.
Excellent. Well, you have transitioned from a financial career to doing this travel concierge advice and, dare I say, creator content as well, full time. Tell me about that transition and how how did you think the career would be, and how is it? Like, what's the perception versus reality when it comes to your entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so maybe I'll go back and explain a little bit about my past. So
Perfect.
I went to college. I studied, finance, accounting, and German actually. So I spent a little bit of time living and working in Europe and Germany, and that's where I really kind of caught the travel bug. And worked for, large corporations. I helped two organizations go public. I spent a decade living and working in New York City, working in finance and corporate finance, which was an amazing time and experience in my life. I really enjoyed that. But I always had this nagging, bug and passion for travel. And so I was, working really, really hard, spending a lot of hours. New York is it's a pressure cooker, right?
Right.
And so, in that space, I was traveling a lot to kind of just take a break and take a breather. And so in doing so, New York's expensive, right? So I became an expert in these programs out of necessity. So just to fuel my own travels and lifestyle, I was like, okay, I bet there's a way I can do this and save money. And so I became obsessed with points, programs, finding great deals. And after doing that, I started helping friends, right? And the turning point came when a group of friends and I wanted to visit South America, right? We were going to go to Patagonia, Buenos Aires, and Rio de Janeiro for Carnival. And the flights that we wanted, the flight path, because we all had to get back for work, were going to be really expensive. It was going to be like $2,000. And I was like, wait a minute, I bet I can find us a better deal because the trip almost got canceled.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so then, fortunately I was able to find a really great deal. I was like, hey, does everyone have like 30, 40,000 like Chase or Amex points? And they're like, yeah. And so I'm like, jump on a conference call. We're going to book it right now. And so I walk everyone through it. We book the things. And then they're like, wait a minute, like how did we do that? I feel like I just stole this flight. I'm like, no, you just used your points smart, right? We are optimizing for how we can get the most bang for buck or value of our points. And in that particular deal, I think we got 4 or 5x the value versus booking in our card tool, which would have been, for that particular example, $2,000 would have been like 200,000 points. So yeah, and such that, I asked them, is this something that you would like be interested in? Like, would you pay for the service? And they're like, absolutely. And then when they told me, what they would pay or what they thought the service was worth, I was like, oh my goodness, like we have a business here. And so, yeah, it was very exciting stuff. And then it's been like a really interesting kind of fun journey, right? Of, building up the processes, right? And I would say, entrepreneurship is hard, right? There's a period where you're kind of like balancing, your normal work and then your kind of side hustle work. And that is a really intense, challenging part of life. And I think, fortunately for me, I had a lot of traction, pretty quickly and was able to kind of like decide to make the move. And, that has afforded me a lot of really amazing opportunities to, be a little more mobile and travel and have some kind of more flexibility. I would say the challenging thing is when you are an entrepreneur and kind of on your own, there's no one telling you what to do. So you have to
Mhm.
be very motivated. You have to work, really, really hard. You have to have the vision, but then you also have to be the execution, your marketing, your finance, your everything, right? And you are learning everything new for the first time. And so that's where I think it's really important to surround yourself with either mentors that have been there, a really strong support system. Particularly for me, I travel a lot, while I'm doing all of this. So like having a strong support system, back home as well is really, really important. And then I would say in general, just with entrepreneurship, the highs are higher and the lows are lower, right? It's just
Yes.
a little bit of a wild ride. And to me, the journey is worth it and extremely rewarding, but it's not for the faint of heart. So I would try before you fully commit. And I would say, if you're thinking about, making a big change in your life, test it out first. If it's a move, maybe go and spend a couple weeks there. If it's, launching new business, like see if there's demand. Make sure that, the thing that you want to do, don't spend months and months and months building it, right? And then launch it to have no one be interested, right? And I think that's something that I learned very quickly in this journey is don't do anything that people aren't asking for, right?
Mm.
And if you know that demand is there and you know that people are going to benefit from it, then the challenging part becomes distribution. And, we're very fortunate in this age of social media, right? Where, you know, any idea that's, good or, has, can grab people's attention is a great way to spread. And I've been very fortunate that social media has helped me spread the word on the services that I offer as well.
Well, it is hard work, speaking as an entrepreneur myself, and especially if you're achievement oriented, I mean, you need to replace an income that was a paycheck, then, it's always you can always compare yourself to someone that you're doing better than, but there's also always those beasts where you're like, "But I'm nothing compared with this." And so there is this constant every day feels different, but also, it's up to you to make it work, but then when you find success, it can often be recurring, which is really powerful.
Yeah, and it's exciting, right? And I think a big part of, this journey personally and probably for anyone that kind of goes through something like this is, the work you have to do on yourself, right? And understanding,
Yeah.
how your mind works and, the triggers and things like that. And I think, that's really important. And I would say, before launching an entrepreneurial endeavor, like understanding, what are the things about you that make you tick? What are the things that are going to be super motivating? What are the things that are, maybe the things that you're not good at? And then not being afraid to outsource those to someone who that is the thing that lights them up. So I think all of that is really important.
So as we think about, each of our entrepreneurial journey, what I know too is that it's a completely different world that I think it's opening people up to possibilities, but you're also living in, the edited images of amazing bride guides, kind of travel around the world. We look and compare ourselves, and as we know, comparison can sometimes be the thief of joy. What is your kind of caution when it comes to that, like, the honest pathway for an entrepreneur versus the way it looks from the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think what's really important is to be radically honest with yourself. Make sure that,
Mm.
before launching an entrepreneurial journey, like, am I okay with the ups and downs and the waves of there's going to be weeks where I'm not sure where the next piece of business is coming from. And, if you're, hiring a team and doing that, there's going to be pretty significant, um, ups and downs, right? And so knowing what are the things about you is that, a life that would leave me happy? Am I in a place where I can feel good and centered in doing that is really important, right? And for some people, that's going to light them up, that's going to excite them, and other people are going to hear that and that's going to terrify them. So depending on which side of the coin you are, like, go with who you are, right? Because at the end of the day, like, knowing who you are and having that sort of, radical self-acceptance is going to be the most important thing because we all bring something special and unique. And just be careful too in this age of social media because a lot of what you see on there is a highlight reel. And like you said, comparison is the thief of joy is such a great quote. I love using that all the time because the way that some of this is described is built too is to have you always feel like you're missing out, right? Someone else is going to have this or that or whatever the
Mhm.
thing is. And so figure out what's important to you, whether it's in travel or in life in general, and then optimize for those things. And so, for many people, travel is one of those things that makes them really happy. For me, it was. So, I'm building a life that's optimized for that. And, it's really fun to get to help other people do that as well, right? And what really motivates me about this is that, like, travel has always been a really amazing place where I can go and learn about a new place and experience different cultures and, take a breath or breather, right? And travel's been something that's been really important to me too, as I process big changes in my life, dealt with difficult, things that, have happened in my personal life. it gives you a moment to take a step back, right? And look at who you are, where you are, and what really matters. And so the ability to kind of, do that has been really, fun and exciting, and helping others do that is helps me get out of bed and really excited every day.
I working in a helping profession is so rewarding, it's so fulfilling, and I was reminded as you talked about that, kind of radical candor. When I first opened Pearl Planning, the first value that we came up with was courageous authenticity.
Yeah.
And, just having the courage to say when things are going great and also when things are difficult, was a pathway that's necessary in financial planning, but also in running a business and in life. So,
Yeah, and it's
Bry,
mhm.
go ahead.
No, it's really important, and I love that. That's such a really amazing, perspective, and yeah, it's just so important, right, for everything that we do.
Well, I know that people who have listened are like, "Tell me more. How do I follow you? Give me all the tips." So how do people, take their fandom from the podcast into the real world?
Well, the first place to find me is on Instagram. That's at Bry Guides, BRYGUIDES. So that's where you really, communicating with folks the most, right? So that's the best place to first go and find me. And then there you'll find links to all the other things. And I'm not sure if we'll put it in the show notes, but
Yeah,
the
we
two,
certainly
okay,
will.
great. The other two places that would be really helpful is I have a points deal finder tool where you just kind of fill out your date, destination, and points balance, which we talked about. Or if you're, relatively new to points and miles and want to set up some time for a one-on-one consult, a one-on-one consultation is a great way to get started, and kind of, we work together to figure out what the right strategy is for you. So, thank you again for this opportunity. I'm really excited to hopefully chat with some of the folks that are listening. And yeah, it's amazing what you can accomplish with credit card points and miles once you start to understand these systems and use them to your benefit. And yeah, I'm excited to help people experience the world in comfort.
Well, I can feel you opening the curtain for us. Thank you. I've learned so much in our conversation, and so much so that I bet we'll have you back sometime if you're open to it. So thank you so much for joining us.
I would love that. Always happy. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great speaking with you today.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to pearlplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned.